So one of the things that I like to make fun of the American left wing for is the fact that they are obsessed. They worship it as if it is an idol to be bowed down to, public transportation systems, or more accurately, they worship the myth of public transportation systems. And they always try to intellectualize it by telling you how inefficient the car is, how you should give up your independence and move into these major metropolitan areas, because you shall see how amazing and fantastical a mass train system and or a mass bus system will be for you in all of your transportation needs. But the thing is, the United States is not Europe. The thing is, the United States is not Japan and or Korea. If you take a map like this one, which is an actual size map of Europe, and then you plop the state of Texas on there, then you will see that we have a completely different population density, so you can't just copy and paste a European transportation system over here and pretend like it's totally fine. Obviously, there are geographical workarounds that are not doable by the most coveted of societal engineers, so we should just drop this topic and think about what we can do. And the thing is, the reason why the left never wants to think about what we can do is because what we actually do in this country in terms of public transportation is an absolute disaster. Our left-wing cities in this country prove each and every day that they can't run the mass transit systems we have now, let alone these grandiose ideas that involve cramming way more people into way smaller paces in order to have this epic Japan-style transportation system. Because we're going to cover a story today out of San Francisco, which really shows the city's decline, because it turns out nobody's paying for their mass transportation system. It's going completely bust, and but for the COVID stimulus money that was poured into them over the past couple of years, they would have already disappeared off the face of the earth. And to me, you can't be trusted to run new transportation systems if this is how you're running it. And it's amazing to see ABC News, a left-leaning outlet, go after them over this and over their ridiculous non-solution to this very serious problem. But before we get into that, this video is sponsored. So let me toss it to the sponsor. I'm going to go frisbee motion right here. Then we'll bring it back over here. We'll talk about it on the other side. Americans' motivation for fitness appears to have never been higher. 42% of Americans, according to a recent survey, report that they're looking for their summer beach bod, and a lot of them are moving towards the keto diet in order to do so. If you're one of these Americans, I have a great tip for you. Go over to ketowithjustice.com right now and get yourself this amazing keto powder. This will help assist in ketosis, prolonging it, so that way you can achieve your goals without all of the rigid restrictions and requirements, and this will aid you in your path. And on top of that, if you go to ketowithjustice.com right now, you can get this amazing powder for 53% off. It also comes with the 60-day money-back guarantee, plus a few other free bonus extras at ketowithjustice.com. Pursue the beach bod, get yourself in shape, ketowithjustice.com.
Like, if we're gonna pay and other people aren't paying, I mean, what's the point?
So that sentiment right there is a perfect distillation of what's wrong with American mass transit in these major left-wing cities, in that they've allowed cheating and they've stopped enforcing the law so much that good people feel like they're losing out by following the rules of our society. This is not something, by the way, that happens in Japan. In fact, Japan, they got a bunch of kind, courteous people that will help you with their system because they don't even consider not paying as an option, because you have to participate and you actually should pay for the things that you benefit from. My mother was recently on vacation there, and she told me the story of an attendant actually coming out and doing the system for her because she doesn't speak Japanese in order for her to get on the train. This is not something that happens in the United States of America. When I was in Rome, the same thing happened, except it was a 15-year-old kid who helped me and my fiance pay for the system that they had there. But in San Francisco, when people speak the language, when they're perfectly capable of paying, they ride for free, and those who pay feel like suckers, and there's nothing to actually undercut that feeling. There's no reason for these people to be paying because everybody is gaming the system over there.
That is one of the issues contributing to the financial crisis with San Francisco's transit system. There are staggering numbers of riders who are jumping on buses or trains, and they are not paying.
So one of the things you have to know about American mass transit systems is they're all managed terribly, they're all jobs programs for union workers, and none of them make any money. There might be a specific line here or there that actually produces a profit, like the Amtrak line that runs from Boston to New York to Washington, D.C., but overall, these are money-losing operations. Even New York City, famed for its subways, has not had a profitable subway system since it was in private hands, and yes, all the major lines in New York City were built by private companies, and it loses money year after year after year, and constantly they beg for bailouts from not only the state government, but from the federal government. And considering one of the reasons why they're losing money is fare evasion, you would think that a basic condition of you asking for money from people not riding the system would be actually getting the fare that you're supposed to collect from riders, but San Francisco is not going to pursue those options. That's too sensible, that's too straightforward to ask people to pay their fares. They'd rather pass the costs, spread them around to other people in the state of California and other residents of San Francisco in the way of horrible, horrific, nasty taxes that just show how absurd the system actually is.
So many people have come up to me to complain that a lot of people aren't paying to ride on Muni. Even people who can pay say they don't because, well, why should they? Keep in mind, it's not like we spent weeks on this story. What we saw is only, like Larry said, a snapshot of the problem.
So the premise of this news segment is a snapshot of what's going on in San Francisco's Muni system. Obviously, you have the reporter showing how easy it is to pay for this system, getting on, and she's going to document all of the people that are not paying. Now, if you were to guess, what do you think the number of people who did not pay for the system is going to be? Let me know your answer down in the comments below. Do you think that we're going to see a representative 40% as reported by the city of San Francisco? Do you think we're going to see 20%? Maybe it was just pandemic, and honestly, people are out of poverty now, and because San Francisco is moving forward into the future, they're so stunning and brave with their woke politics, it had people come together. Or maybe you'll think it's less. Maybe you'll think it's 10%. Or maybe you even think it's more. Maybe you think it's a 50-50 split. Again, let me know down in the comments what you think this reporter is going to discover, because unshockingly, you're going to not be surprised when I actually reveal the number.
Most people are still paying just as they did pre-COVID.
So this joker is the one running the mass transit system in San Francisco, running it directly into the ground, and he says, listen, don't worry about it. Most people are paying, which, by the way, very deceptive and weaselly language, because his own reporting shows about 40% fare evasion, so that's technically most people still paying. However, you're going to see the number, and more importantly, you're going to see the makeup of the population that is not paying for the system, because it's actually quite surprising. I expect to see young people, disproportionately male, maybe even disproportionately black or Hispanic, doing fare evasion. When I was a young guy, this is something that I considered. I actually never jumped the turnstiles, but that's a whole other story, because I was kind of older when I started riding the mass transit system in this way. But in this kind of thing, you would expect it to skew young, you would expect it to skew people who commit other crimes, but guess what? It's way broader than you could have possibly imagined.
Paying, did he say? Because we had our doubts, we decided to record who paid and who didn't. Here we go. These two women did not pay. Neither did he. No, this couple walked right on without paying. This man attempted to pay, but for some reason his Clipper card never worked. Nope, too busy talking on the phone. No. This passenger paid with her Clipper card, but the person behind her did not. No, and no. And one more no. That's $12.50 that Muni did not collect from those 5 people. We estimated that about 3/4 of the people who got on that bus never paid.
So right there, you saw a diverse cross-section of people in the city of San Francisco not paying. Very notable, you have elderly Asian people not paying for the transit system. Probably, if you were going to break down any kind of crime statistic ever put forward in the history of ever, elderly Asian people would be doing the best, but apparently in the city of San Francisco, they're not paying for this. Now, I might be willing to grant that maybe there's the language barrier or something like that, but considering all the different programs that cities like San Francisco have that give reduced fares to elderly people, that will give free passes, so at least it's documented, to elderly people in poverty, I think that they're legitimately not paying. On top of that, I noticed that disproportionately, the people who were paying were actually elderly white people. Very interesting to see that one of the few cases of somebody paying was an elderly white woman. You also had a guy who was trying to pay, but his card didn't work, so I'm going to give him partial credit right there. And of course, we have the couple that I thought did pay, but apparently they just didn't.
A Muni driver told us a good day for her is when 40% of passengers pay.
I'm honest, but if I were really pressed and didn't have anything to pay with, I would do the same thing.
Now, just because elderly white people tend to be the ones shown to be paying, and by the way, if you were wondering what the answer to that question was I asked earlier, it was 3/4 not paying, so 75% not paying in this rate, doesn't mean that they don't have stupid answers. So you have this old guy saying, well, if I was pressed for cash, then I wouldn't pay either. It's totally understandable. This is exactly the problem that you have in the city of San Francisco. You need to stop empathizing, stop sympathizing with the people who refuse to pay, who refuse to follow the rules. Go look at the rates right then and there. It is $3 for a ride, $5 for a day pass. It's free, by the way, if you're under the age of 19. So one of the reasons why this doesn't skew younger is because younger people ride for free. By the way, good way to make up some revenue is to charge them even a third fare or half fare like the seniors pay. And we talked about in the multiple different ways that if you're actually in poverty, you can get reduced fare. So there's no excuse for not paying. It is not a legitimate excuse to say, oh, I'm so poor or anything like that. If you want these amenities to continue, you need to pay the fare. And if you're the city of San Francisco, you need to stop thinking that these are all Aladdins just not paying because, oh, they're such dire straits. It's so sad. I want to cry about it. And actually acknowledge that there's a serious problem here. Because again, if you're asking for welfare from the state government, from the federal government, in order to prop up this system, the least you could do, the bare minimum, is to make sure the people who are supposed to pay for it actually pay their fare.
Some are candid about their reason for not paying.
I just think post-pandemic, it's kind of like the norm, as far as I've seen. Especially when it just goes up and down market. I don't know. I don't know. People don't pay, so I don't know.
Look, this guy is not wrong. Now, I dislike him. I despise him. He's obviously a well-to-do San Franciscoite. He could afford to pay for this, but he's not wrong that this just became the norm. If you remember, that 40% number that was quoted as the rate that people are fare evading, the bus driver here actually says she would be lucky to get 40% on any given day to actually pay for those services.
A Muni driver told us a good day for her is when 40% of passengers pay.
And again, when this system goes bust eventually, because all things must come to an end, you're going to see this person completely out of a job, despite the fact that she is providing the services to people. And by the way, don't think I did not take note of the fact that this is one of the oldest lines in San Francisco. So for decades and decades, maybe even close to a century, they've kept this up and running, this little trolley bus system. And guess what? It is being ruined by the fact that they refuse to enforce fare evasion. They refuse to stop these people from getting on board this transit system. This is what you have to do if you want to keep things like this. And I'm not going to sign up for these grandiose plans for mass transit lines, totally reorganize the population of the United States because some dork nerd who hates cars is really mad that we don't look like Europe because that would make him feel better, when you can't even run the system that you already have, when you can't even maintain the system that you already have. Because when you're running at giant deficits, you know what you're not doing? You're not improving the lines. When you're running at giant deficits, you know what you're not doing? You're not improving services. You're not keeping them clean. Eventually, something's got to give. And all of these people are contributing in their small way to the destruction of San Francisco. On top of that, it's been proven in the city of New York that enforcing fare evasion has downstream crime effects that are a net positive, at least when you're trying to enforce it and you don't let it get out of hand to the point where all of these people are just evading people who would not normally do so if there were actually consequences. Because what you find out is that in an environment where you're enforcing fare evasion is that you end up catching a lot of people that are going into the downtown areas to commit thefts or other types of crimes before they get into that area. So you have downstream benefits from enforcing the law on policies like this. So not only does it help restore your transit system, but it also ends up having positive effects on crime overall. And as we've talked about time and time again, crime drives poverty. I mean, what are these people going to do who actually need to rely on this transit system to get to work when it goes defunct, when fares go up? They're going to experience a lot of negative consequences from the fact that San Francisco refuses to enforce the law, a basic law. Pay the fare, pay for your services.
But Jeffrey Tumlin clarified that there are other ways to pay that perhaps we didn't catch on camera.
What we've done is invented new fare instruments. Right now, you can download Muni Mobile and pay with your phone rather than paying with your Clipper card.
Have you ever heard of the Muni mobile app?
Yeah.
Do you use it?
No.
Seriously, I really genuinely do have a very special place in my little itty bitty baby heart right around ya for the local news, because this guy says, oh, no, don't worry about it. We got an app, and these people are definitely 100% times 10 for sure paying through the app. And then they interview a guy. They're like, have you heard of this app? He's like, yeah, I've heard of it. They're like, do you use it? He's like, no, it's free. Why would I pay for the train? Why would I choose to do that? Absolutely not.
We finally found a passenger using Muni Mobile, an honest, law-abiding tourist who had a one-day pass on his phone.
So you paid using the app?
Yes, right.
Who is surprised by this? Honestly and truly, who is surprised by the fact that the person who downloaded the app in advance and paid for the pass happens to be a tourist? Nobody should be. This is obvious because people in Europe don't tend to do fare evasion in this way. They tend to follow the rules, higher trust society. So unsurprisingly, this non-American tourist is paying for the fare. He's like, yeah, obviously. He's like, this is a weird thing to be interviewed about on the news. So can't wait till I tell people back in my home country how crazy you Americans are.
There are people who feel that because others aren't paying, that why should I?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the reason.
If you ever wondered why police interrogations work, this is exactly why. This guy just doesn't pay for the train. I thought he did earlier, and I'm sorry for saying so. My bad. I gave bad reporting earlier in this video. I could edit it out this video, but no, I'm going to leave in the mistakes so you think I am a human being, just like you out there in the audience. But what this woman did was essentially give a more palatable explanation for his bad behavior, and he's like, yeah, sure. That's why I don't pay, because nobody else pays. Now, there is some truth to that in that they're not enforcing the law, so that's why they're not paying, because there's no consequences for it. But the reason he's not paying is because he's taking advantage of the system. He's gaming the system. This doesn't look like an individual who's in poverty or in distress or is incapable. This just looks like somebody who's not going to pay if society indicates that theft in this way is perfectly fine.
We still try to pay our fare as much as we can, but it just gets to a point to where it's like, what's the point, you know?
So here you have the woman trying to say, oh, no, we're good people. We try to pay as much as we can. But today, we went bankrupt. I don't know if you know this. We're actually coming back from the bankruptcy court, and we need that little $3, $6 between us in order to go to bankruptcy court and get bread for our family from the bankruptcy court. We're in such poverty. Trust me, we're good people. We totally pay, just not on the days that you're watching, but also we don't like to pay because nobody's paying, but also we definitely try to pay whenever we can. What do you think we are? People who are participating in the downfall of society? People who are going along with the trends as set in stone by the government of San Francisco? Absolutely not. No, don't. Just shush your face.
Because Muni bus drivers have been assaulted in the past for trying to collect a fare, it's understandable that they don't engage with anyone who refuses to pay.
So this is wrong, incorrect, not even close, definitely not the direction situation you're going into, and bad logic. This idea that because a bus driver has been assaulted in the past, therefore no bus drivers should actually try to collect fares or should try to have any consequences for the people who are not paying doesn't make any sense at all. Because what you're essentially saying is that violence works, and when you actually make political change on behalf of violent actors, you're essentially allowing terrorism to take hold. This would be like if after the September 11th attacks, we all just converted to Islam and we were like, you know what? They got a point. Those 19 hijackers, we're going to have to side with them because that's what we're supposed to do. Absolutely not. You strengthen the consequences for people who assault bus drivers, and you enforce the fare. And by the way, they're going to talk about the fare inspectors. Let's hear about them.
That's the responsibility of the fare inspectors, who are supposed to ask passengers to show proof of payment.
We have transit fare inspectors that are out there every day collecting good data about who's paying and who's not paying.
So when was the last time you saw an enforcement officer on Muni?
I would say probably a year ago on a Muni train, not on a bus.
Seriously, local news, you are really touching my heart. You're pulling on the strings by shredding the head of the San Francisco Mass Transit Authority. Because he says something, it's a total lie. You can tell it's a lie, by the way, by his body language and by how unconfident he is. You can hear it in his voice. It projects weakness all over you. And guess what? They cut to somebody immediately and they're like, on the bus? A fare inspector? Get the hell out of here. They're not out here every day. The last one I saw was on a train, and that was a year ago, which is kind of insanely absurd and ridiculous. You need to enforce the fares. If you say the bus drivers aren't allowed to engage and you have fare inspectors, they have to actually be there and they have to actually, exist.
Here's the problem with not paying. Transit fares represent 18% of SFMTA's revenue, or about $219 million. That's part of the reason why Muni had a $134 million deficit in 2022.
So I think this pie chart is absolutely indicative of the problem that the city of San Francisco and major metropolitan areas are facing in multiple different ways. First and foremost, as you can see on that pie chart, fares represent the smallest portion of the puzzle. You're actually charging drivers in a lot of ways in order to compensate for the fact that these train systems can't pay for themselves. However, did you hear the numbers that were quoted by that woman? Let's hear them again.
Transit fares represent 18% of SFMTA's revenue, or about $219 million. That's part of the reason why Muni had a $134 million deficit in 2022.
They have a $122 million deficit, the Muni system in San Francisco, that they're doing this piece about. Now, according to the San Francisco head and all these people, they have about 40% fare evasion. So some quick maths for you guys out there, if you'll indulge me, can really clarify where the problem actually is versus what they're trying to point to later to identify as the problem. So if that $219 million represents 60%, the first thing we want to do is divide that by 3 so we can get a 20% number. Remember, we're trying to make up that remaining 40%. Then we multiply it by 5, and guess what? We have a number of 365 million. If you subtract the 365 million from the 219 million that they're currently collecting, then you end up with 146 million.
That's part of the reason why Muni had a $134 million deficit in 2022.
Now, I might have said it was actually 122 million when it's actually 134, according to what she just said, but that would leave you net up at least $12 million to spare. Now, I'm not saying that it's actually practically possible to get all of these people to pay. I'm not saying that people won't walk rather than take this for free, but I'm also pointing to the fact that fare evasion, according to the people who are actually there and experiencing it, seems to be higher. So maybe you would have to raise the fare at least 50 cents and actually do some enforcement, but you can make up the deficit that they're experiencing and keep this line running just through fare evasion and some modest increases on the price that riders of this service are actually using.
Too many numbers for you, you say? Well, perhaps you'll be interested in knowing how Muni is seriously thinking about addressing this shortfall. Now listen up, because this will likely affect you.
Now, I explained how you can address the majority of this shortfall. You can actually attack this problem exactly where it is, meet the challenge, and get people to pay for what they're supposed to pay for, and you will cover most of the gap. Maybe you even raise fare modestly. But guess what? San Francisco, not going to do that. Guess what? The city of San Francisco, of course, will never pursue the most logical solution. They want to do what all of these transit systems actually want to do, which is go after people not using them, because of course, these are ideologically based for a lot of these people, and they'd rather have criminals taking advantage and gaming the system, because they can use that to go after people who don't even have any interest in it, like drivers in the city of San Francisco. It's not an accident that people's parking fees end up paying a huge portion of the budget, larger than fares, and that is something that they're going to pursue further.
Extend the hours of parking meters on weekdays to include nights and on Sundays. That's 28,000 parking meters that could potentially be active on Sundays.
So that would bring in an extra about $18 million a year. It's enough to save 3 Muni lines.
Other proposals include expanding neighborhood parking permits, increased taxes on off-street parking in downtown garages. Another idea that circulated in the past is downtown congestion pricing.
Yeah, that's right. So they want to extend parking meter fees. They want to extend the time that they're running into the night and go after drivers. On top of that, they also want to tax you for parking in a garage. So you can't park on the street. You can't park in a garage. You're basically totally screwed if you're actually driving and trying to avoid the rampant criminality, which, by the way, we haven't even touched on, that is going on the city of San Francisco's mass transit systems. And he said this to increase their money by, again, $18 million. So this guy would rather target drivers, turn the screws to them, and get $18 million than actually enforce fare evasion and get the money that they actually need to run the system. Again, total dope, total monster, horrible person, and another reason why we're seeing decay in the city. On top of that, they also want to do congestion pricing, which I will talk about maybe in a more in-depth way in the future, but probably not, because I suggested I would, and that's usually how I roll. I don't like to reveal my cards a little too early, but the thing is, that is again not addressing the problem.
Except that after the pandemic, downtown has been slow to recover.
But at least in San Francisco, this doesn't look like it's going to do anything, because they've had so many closures and problems in downtown and so many car break-ins that people don't want to drive downtown anyway. So the congestion pricing won't produce the revenue that they want it to produce in the first place.
So many proposals, right, out there. Why not do something simple like enforce fares?
Well, we should enforce fares, but fare evasion is a small piece of the problem. And even if we had 100% fare compliance, that would not solve this problem. So we need the state to help out.
Again, it is absolutely fascinating to me how politicians answer the simplest, most obvious questions. So you have this reporter saying, hey, instead of this complicated bailout strategy and taxing people for parking and getting rid of Sunday as a free day for parking, I guess they're going to do holidays next, and going after people parking in garages, why don't you just, collect the fares? And this guy says, oh, that's just a small portion. We need a state bailout. We want that state money because they want to hand it out to their goons in order to profit more off the system. But according to the numbers that they're submitting to me in this video, and again, that's the conservative numbers from the people who are lying about this system, fare evasion and 100% compliance would actually specifically get rid of the deficit by the numbers. Now, I'm a guy who likes me some charts, so if you want to see something amazing that is representative, let's take a look at how the purchase rate versus the ridership rate for the monthly pass is going over time. As you can see, as of 2019, pre-pandemic, you have a pretty strong correlation with ridership and monthly passes. This is because if you're riding consistently and they're enforcing fare evasion, this is the cheapest way in order to pay for the fare. And by the way, it says that we had around 33,000 people per month paying for these monthly passes. So if you multiply 33,000 times the cost of the monthly pass, which is $81, you end up with 2 million. You multiply that by 12 and you get $32,076,000 in monthly passes that you can expect in revenue for a year. However, ridership obviously dropped off during the pandemic, But as you can see, there is a great disparity between the resuming ridership and the people purchasing those passes. Now what you can see is that we have 7,257 monthly passes, and they are not tracking at all with the increase in ridership. They seem to be lagging behind by a factor of 3 from where they were before. Now you multiply that by 81 by 12 months out of the year, and you see about $7 million. So something that was generating $32 million is now down 25 million. Now, as you can see right here, the ridership versus the monthly passes seem to be falling down about a third to actually a fourth of what the ridership actually is. We'll take the conservative estimate, multiply that 7 million by 2, and I will just point out that enforcing fare evasion, making people pay, will get them to buy these monthly passes because it's the least expensive way to pay, and you will end up with a net $14 million. Considering the guy wants to do the parking meter things for $18 million, this right here already almost gets you to that point. And again, enforcement can address the problem. Now, as you can also see in this chart, it is undeniable that a huge portion of the revenue loss is the fact that ridership has decreased so dramatically. And I would say, to address that specific issue, that enforcing fare evasion can actually increase ridership, because right now, every psycho, every single person who doesn't want to pay, who wants to commit a crime, or whatever, can get around basically for free by not paying and having this not enforced against them. So you're actually driving a lot of good people away. And remember, some of this time, right during the pandemic, service was reduced dramatically, so people were still riding it. But when they restored service on all these other lines, people still haven't come back on because people are scared. They don't want to be on the buses with these people. Have you guys seen a bus in California? Have you seen the people who ride them? Well, you can clear some of them off by, enforcing fare evasion.
The federal stimulus monies that have kept Muni afloat are expected to run out. SFMTA is hoping the state will provide some short-term relief funds. If not, the transit agency may have to scale back Muni to pandemic levels of service, when only 40% of routes were up and running.
So many people are riding Muni and BART right now, and we can't have them fall apart.
So I hate this attitude. If you want the system to run, get the people who are using it to pay for the system. It's totally absurd that even in their heavily subsidized model, they are not expecting people to actually do the basics to allow a society to function. So yes, to be clear, they need to pay for it. The people who are using it need to fork over the cash. It's absurd to say otherwise.
So Muni says 70% of their passengers make less than $50,000 a year. We can only assume that because many are not able to afford a car, Muni is their only option. So who's going to be affected here? Seniors, students, people with disabilities, people of color. The solution, they say, according to Scott Wiener, is that ridership has to go up by a lot on Muni and BART.
So first of all, credit where credit is due to this Asian reporter for coughing at the most opportune time, which was when she stated the suggestion from the city alderman or councilman. I don't even know what they're called in San Francisco, nor do I care. When he said, we just need ridership to go up. That cough.
The solution, they say, according to Scott Wiener, is that ridership has to go up by a lot on Muni and BART.
Cleverly timed. You, girl, are a hero for doing it. Even if it was inadvertent, I think it was psychologically you trying to say that's absurd. But also, the way that they wrap up the segment made me laugh.
But that's not fixing the problem at all.
Yeah.
It just means, okay, so we have more people on the system, so the percentage of people that are paying will go up, but we're still not really addressing the people who are not paying.
We're always going to
all.
have a deficit if things don't change.
And we'll just make people that park their car on the street
pay for everybody who comes.
Until they don't want to come because they don't want to pay at night.
I think I love this portion of the segment more than anything because they just articulated how left-wing policies end up driving you into poverty, how criminality, letting it run rampant, end up pushing people and destroying a major metropolitan area when left unchecked. And they did it in the most natural way humanly possible, while realizing that what they're being told by their politicians makes no sense at all. It's absolutely insane. He's like, wait a minute, You want to make it so expensive for people in the cars that they want to ride the transit system, but then if they don't pay for the transit system, that doesn't solve the problem. Shouldn't you address fare evasion? Like, they're figuring it out. It's like watching somebody who sucks at math, like their whole life, like a 5-year-old, like solve their first subtraction equation right here. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. I mean, this is where I was, and this is where the country was, 20, 30 years ago. But it's good to know that these 3 anchor actors can put their brains together to realize that not enforcing fares actually has negative consequences, and a city council that refuses to do so is only going to make matters worse. It's beautiful to see. I am so proud of it. It's just amazing. It just put this in a museum for economic intellectuals going forward, that even some dumb idiots in the city of San Francisco that probably vote progressive at 99% of the time, if not 100% of the time, can figure this out. It's crazy. It's absurd. Now look, I'm not blanket against mass transit. I think under the right circumstances, it can completely work. But when these people, the big idea people behind these national systems that are not applicable in the United States, are going to be the ones elevated to run it, you should raise some red flags. You definitely should not give them your money. As a general rule, when somebody shows themselves to be too incompetent to stir sugar into coffee, like the head of the San Francisco MTA showed throughout the whole course of this interview, you don't give that person more money. They're untrustworthy. You definitely shouldn't support them. And again, this is just an underrated way that the city of San Francisco is falling apart, and I'm happy to highlight it for you guys out there. Now, I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments down below. If you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about how fare evasion is partially one of the things that is destroying the city of San Francisco. Till next time.